Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are reviewing Fast and Furious 10 Fast X. I will say it was not as bad as I thought it would be. It is leagues better than Fast 8, leagues better than Hobbs and Shaw, and about a million times better than Fast 9, which I thought was an abysmal entry and just an all-round terrible film. I was relatively engaged, I think, for the first hour of this film. I think it aligned the story quite well, it set up the stakes quite well, and introduced some potentially compelling growth dynamics for some of our main characters to go through. Because that's been the thing, I think, for me with Dom Toretto for the last few films, is that he's not really had any kind of character growth. I think Brian O'Connor, was always the element that kept this franchise grounded. His journey from kind of cop to street racer to domesticated family man was always the most compelling element of these films, and the one linchpin that kind of tethered it back to reality ever so slightly. And without Paul Walker, obviously you have lost the emotional undercurrent that kind of carries this franchise and elevated it to anything more than just a CGI bore fest. But at the start of this film, they did kind of tease an interesting kind of relationship between Dom and his son, and I thought the one scene that they essentially had together at the start of the film was quite good. But then they spend the rest of the film apart and it does nothing with that. I think the biggest sin of the Fast franchise, there are a lot, but the biggest sin of all, I think, is the indecision that it has regarding plot dynamics, regarding character fates, regarding character personalities in general. You know, we saw what's happened to Luke Hobbs and Dwayne Johnson over the course of Fast 5 through to 8. Fast 5, badass character, accent, an interesting personality, and was just an absolute unit on screen and a really interesting anti-hero kind of prominence in the story. Fast 6 to Fast 8, just the gradual regression into Dwayne Johnson archetype. There was no kind of consistency with that character. In this film, Jacob Toretto, played by John Cena, gets that same treatment. It's a complete character 180. Yes, John Cena is better at playing the levity and the kind of humour, and it's a role that kind of fits him like a glove, but considering this is supposed to be the same character we met in Fast 9, there's just absolutely no kind of continuity. We don't need to talk about the kind of way that this franchise deals with main character deaths. No one dies. The ending of this film is further proof of that, to the point now that when they do, you know, when there is supposedly a casualty in a film, you're never emotionally engaged because you are just thinking at the back of your mind, is that a big enough explosion to kill this character, or are they gonna just return in the next part? That is a big kind of fault that this film has, is that there was kind of one casualty, I suppose, towards the end of the film, but you kind of watch it and think, well, are they gone? Death is such a transient part of the Fast franchise that you're never quite sure how to interpret a supposed fate or demise of a character. This ensemble is way too big now. There is very few characters who I think have little relevance. The film kind of splits off into several separate subplots, separating the members of the gang. And one of those gangs include Roman, Tej, Ramsey and Han. Their whole kind of storyline in this film is just redundant. They don't really have any kind of relevance to the plot. Ramsey's been in 4 of these films now, and like, I couldn't care less about that character. 4 films in to having her around, she's a redundant presence. The script has never elevated her beyond technology exposition. That is her sole role. She is a plot function and nothing else. The other big mistake this franchise made was bringing Han back, because they rewrote the entire chronology of the Fast films just to keep Han in, building up to that death, only then to reverse it 2 films later and do nothing with him in the 2 films he's been resurrected for. He's just there. Roman and Tej were always the comedic relief, the comedic back and forth, the banter. That does wear a little thin in this one. I didn't find myself laughing as much, mainly because when we are in a scene with them, their scene is ultimately meaningless. It doesn't really build to anything, apart from a scene that kind of incorporates yet another character of the franchise. The new characters, also quite dull. Brie Larson as the daughter of Mr. Nobody, okay, doesn't have a real lasting impact. Alan Ritchson as Ames, the new kind of head of the agency, roll your eyes, okay. The only new addition to the cast to really talk about is Jason Momoa as Dante Reyes. He was a real jolt of just campy flamboyance that actually blended quite well to the tone of the film. There were a couple of moments when some of his choices did feel a bit too far and a couple of scenes where I just thought, you know, we could have dialed it back just a tad to keep him from going full theatricality, pantomime vibes. But for the most part, I really enjoyed him as a villain. Easily the best villain we've had since Jason Statham in Fast 7. Just a cool dude. I think if you got rid of the scene where he called Dom a butthole and just cut out the completely redundant scene where he's painting a corpse's toenails, he would have been an absolute 10 out of 10 for me, best part of the film. In fact, I think he still is the best part of the film. The film leans a bit too heavily into like the serial killer dynamics as Dante is this criminal mastermind luring Dom into dark rooms with televisions and then monologuing to him and all that. But Jason Momoa thankfully pulls it off. I think if you didn't have the actor who could bring that to life in the right way, that script and that kind of vibe would just have collapsed and made the entire film crumble with it. So let's talk about the action, because I think that's the only other real element of the Fast franchise that anyone talks about. I didn't find myself repulsed by anything I was watching. In Fast 8, I was repulsed by the army of robotic cars charging through the streets. I was repulsed by, you know, the submarine shtick at the end. I'm not sure what else happened in that film. Fast 9, I was repulsed by just about everything that happened there. The rope swing in the forest, Dom kind of pulling an entire building down on top of him and 20 super spy agents. Dom basically blocking a car at one point in the final fight. Dom surviving pretty much the entirety. Fast 9 was just an absolute sham. The action in this one, I feel like if I was going to link it to another Fast film, it would be Fast 7. It was ludicrous, it was completely unplausible, but it was still entertaining. The kind of chase through Rome, I know a lot of people are saying that, yeah, the action was average, but that Rome chase was good. I'd agree. The Rome chase was good. I did enjoy the kind of final chase on the highway as well. That felt surprisingly restrained for a Fast finale. Until the end when obviously Dom drives off a dam. So I was quite impressed at how, I'm not going to use the word grounded, but how, what is the right adjective here? I don't know. It wasn't Fast 9, it wasn't Fast 8. It's a very average film, guys. By Fast standards, it's better than the last few we've had. If you're not on board with the bombastic BS that this film conjures up, then you're definitely not going to become a fan of this franchise. I don't think anyone is a fan of this franchise at this point. Not unironically, at least. You know, these films are so parodical, they're so, I hope, self-aware. They are over-the-top cheap entertainment. And for the most part, it succeeds at that. If you have seen it, guys, do let me know what you think. Also, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. That's a huge help for me. And in the meantime, we'll see you for the next vid.